Hey, what's up guys, it's Matt with the Movement System. In this video, we're going to talk about high intensity interval training versus low intensity steady state training and which one you should be doing. Let's get right into the benefits of each type of training. Low intensity steady state training is typically done at a low heart rate that makes it truly aerobic. An example of this could be an incline walk, a light jog, or going on a bike and hopping on for say 30, 40, 50 minutes at just a steady low heart rate. Typically, we want to do this type of training below 75% of our maximum heart rate. And doing this type of training shouldn't feel like it's incredibly hard. Some of the benefits of doing low intensity steady state training include one, that it's very recoverable. Low intensity training does not put a lot of fatigue into the body and it tends to not interfere too much with our other training, for example, like our strength training. This is why it can be a really good part of a strength athlete or a bodybuilder's program without interfering much with hypertrophy or strength gains. It's also really good at driving our basic cardiovascular adaptations like improving our heart chamber size and upregulating our aerobic enzymes. All of these things help us to deliver more oxygen to our muscles and help us to feel better day to day. Furthermore, low intensity training is really good at building economy for things like cycling and jogging. So if you want to be more efficient at the way that you run, low intensity training can be really beneficial for that. With all that said though, there are some drawbacks of low intensity steady state training. One being that it's fairly time consuming. We typically need a higher volume of aerobic training at low intensity to really drive the same adaptations that we can get from using higher intensity for a shorter period of time. Now, low intensity training is a bit more enjoyable. If you're just on an incline walk, you could be on your phone, you could be watching this YouTube video, you could be doing anything like that and kind of enjoy your time. And that might not be a big factor for you, that it does take a bit longer. But for some people who are really crunched on time, it may not be the most efficient choice. Another drawback of low intensity training is that it doesn't really significantly benefit anaerobic performance. So if you do have anaerobic performance goals, like you want to be able to sprint faster, for example, you're not really going to get a lot of that benefit from doing low intensity training. Now let's talk about HIIT training. So the definition of HIIT is to bring one's hand or a tool or weapon in contact with, not that kind of HIIT. HIIT training is a type of training that involves repeated bouts of high intensity effort followed by varied recovery times. An example of HIIT training is doing something like repeated sprints or repeated bike sprints for say 10-15 seconds with a few minutes of recovery between those high intensity intervals. This may last for typically around 10 to 20 minutes for the entirety of a high intensity interval training session. Of course, this will be different for different people. Some people are really well conditioned for HIIT and can handle it more times or higher volume. But when you're just starting out, I think 10 to 20 minute sessions with a few high intensity intervals is plenty enough to get the effect. Some of the benefits of high intensity interval training include that it is very time efficient. In just, for example, 10 minutes, we can drive a lot of significant benefits. We can improve our maximal work capacity for maintaining things like sprinting. If you're an anaerobic athlete, this can be really beneficial for your performance. Furthermore, high intensity interval training burns a lot of calories in a small amount of time. So we can, for example, burn a similar amount of calories in about 10 minutes of high intensity training as maybe 30 or more minutes of lower intensity training. Now, that said, there are some drawbacks to high intensity interval training. One being that it's very fatiguing, so it's actually harder to do and it's harder to adhere to if you don't really like doing it. If you can really enjoy just getting on the treadmill and going for a low intensity walk, you may be actually willing to more consistently do that, but to get yourself to sprint as hard as you can for 10 or 15 seconds multiple times in a high intensity interval training session may be harder to adhere to for some people. Also, we're limited on how much of this we can recover from before it starts to interfere with our other types of training. I think once or twice a week for most people will be fairly recoverable as long as it's low volume, meaning we're only doing it for 10 or 20 minutes once or twice a week. But if we start to really try to push ourselves and do really high intensity intervals many times a week, that's when we can start to see an interference effect between that and the strength gains that we're making from other training. So with that said, knowing the benefits of both, which one should you be doing? And the answer is probably a combination of both. I think most people can use low intensity steady state training as a warm up, for example, 10 minutes before their training session, or as a cool down, for example, 10 to 20 minutes following their training session. And of course, it can just be done on its own. For example, just going for a walk on your off days. Trying to incorporate an average of around 30 minutes of low intensity steady state training per day is recommended for cardiovascular and health benefits, and also is unlikely to significantly interfere with strength or hypertrophy gains. In fact, having a base level of aerobic conditioning can actually be beneficial. When it comes to high intensity interval training though, how much of that should you do and when? I typically recommend doing this 1 or maybe 2 sessions per week. The key here to making this actually beneficial is to make it truly high intensity. And if we're trying to do this every day, for example, we're probably not going to get the most benefit out of those high intensity intervals. But by programming it, for example, once or twice a week on a conditioning specific day or following your strength training, I think you can get a lot of benefit from doing high intensity interval training. Personally, based on the research that I've reviewed, if your goal is strength or hypertrophy, a cycling ergometer seems to have the lowest interference effect and may actually even help with your strength and hypertrophy goals. So I would probably choose that, with sprinting being a close second in terms of the modality that you're choosing. So hopefully that helps give you guys some guidance. Make sure you go ahead and hit that like button for the YouTube algorithm, hit that subscribe button as well. And if you guys want to learn more, go ahead and follow along on Instagram as well at The Movement System. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.